Hi everyone, and thanks so much for tuning in. Today I'm really excited to interview Star Riparetti. Star, can you please tell everyone who's watching a little bit about yourself and about your experience with crystals?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Ashley. It's a pleasure. And I started out by making flower essences. I actually my history is that I worked in nuclear medicine for a long time. So I learned about energies and things that you can't see or touch or taste or smell, but they are very powerful. And then I started working with the other end of the spectrum of energy, the radiation is like a sledgehammer, and then the flowers are like the feather, but they're all equally very powerful. And it was later that I had played with crystals, but I hadn't actually worked with crystals. And then after I had made my line of the first line of flower essences from orchids in Peru, I I had a friend that came that had spent a long time in India and had a lot of gemstones. A lot of he was learning about them, and especially the therapeutic gemstone necklaces. And that's how I began, because I was familiar with making essences, and I'd made a lot of essences. And I when he came to visit me with all of these. He had a lot of necklaces with him, and that of the highest quality. And I got this very strong message in the night from the angels and some guides and masters that I was supposed to make gemstone essences. And I was pretty surprised about that, because they're not my field of expertise. But Spirit assured me that I was a good essence maker and that there was a need for them. And so I thought, well, how do I approach this with my friend? I don't even have any. I had a few crystals, but I didn't have anything that was really exquisite quality. And so his name is Virendra, and Virendra, I talked to him the next morning, and he was just so excited. He thought it was the best idea in the world. And he was traveling up to Mount Shasta, but he wanted to leave me with some of his really high quality gemstones to make essences from. So that was the sign, because I didn't even own them, and he didn't ask for anything in return. He was just happy that his stones could be of service. So that's how it began.
That's so beautiful, and I know you have a huge line of essences available, and that's really where your expertise lies. So, I mean, obviously that's your specialty, and it kind of evolved and just kept growing. Um, what was it that really made you want to pursue that? I mean, was it just kind of that little message from the universe and that inner knowing, or was it like you're feeling called by the crystals in any way? What was it that made you know that was a good path to take?
The way that I tell a lot of things is that it's easy. Everything falls into place. I don't keep hitting walls. Things open up. Like when I asked him, and then I'm negotiating with Spirit at that point. Like, I don't, it takes me a long time to sit with a flower and to get the information. And Spirit was very clear that the information for the crystals was already there. That there's lots of books. Of course, this was pre-internet, which now you can find a lot of information. So it was really going to those books. They really let me know that I didn't have to reinvent the wheel in that regard, that I could look and see that things would just jump out at me that would help me to describe the, what they were for. Because I started out, I said, look, I'll make the ones that I feel very directly connected with and that are for the chakras. I can work with that. You know, I'll make seven. And then they just kept being added. And then I think the first round I made 19. And then it kept, the whole line of gems kept growing. And the reason being is because the message just continued to be strong that they needed to be out there, that not everybody can afford to go buy the gems they need to heal, and that I would be doing a great service, and that I should keep making them. And sometimes they're very obscure, and the message is like, make it even if it's just for one person. That person will know and be able to find it, and it will be worth it. Of course, on my end, because I have a business, it's like, what about the labels and the brochures and the
Right.
information? The gyms, that's not their problem. They want to serve, and because I also want to serve, that's been the heart calling, that the connection. And I it at this point, I don't know if I love the flowers more than the gyms. It's like talking about your children. So I love them all. I do them differently. For the gems, I do research for what they're for. For the flowers, I actually talk to the flowers to get the information directly from them. But the guardians of the gems always come in when I make the essences. You can feel their presence. Magic always happens. The last ones I made, in fact, we're just going to be introducing, I forget, 11 of the, I think, 19 that we made on the equinox in September, I think. And we'll be introducing them for this equinox, the March equinox. And I made them with my friend Virendra and his lovely wife Sia over in Arizona. And he had been ill, and that's why I went over there. But by the time I got there, he was so invigorated. And when I said that I wanted to perhaps make those essences, he just rallied, and they got out this big. They have a big copper pyramid, and they set up a field and a grid, and everything just fell into place. Their daughter was there, who's a beautiful being. She was born at Sai Baba's ashram, and
Oh,
she's
beautiful.
14, and uh, just it was a beautiful experience, and that's what makes me know that it's the right thing, because it's like the sky opened up, the sun came out, everything was perfect there. Anything that could go right went right.
That's wonderful. And a lot of people who are watching might not realize is that the use of gem essences is very, very old. I mean, gem essences have long roots in Ayurvedic medicine.
Right.
Now, is that tie to these high quality gemstones from India? Was that something that made you kind of tap into those ancient sources of information when you were looking at how the different gemstones could be used in your research?
Yes, that's a good point. One of the reasons that I even agreed to make them is because I'm wearing one right now, some turquoise apatite, uh, and they're rounded. All the ones that I use are rounded. They're not the natural stones that sometimes have the matrix of something else. And when you're working with crystals, you really have to know what you're doing. You can either be putting energy in or taking it out, and and you want high quality when you're doing surgeries with them and things like that. And if you're wearing those big beautiful diamonds, you have to be really aware of what your thoughts are. And if you happen to be bleeding and you're wearing a ruby, you can like exacerbate your bleeding. You have to know a lot when you're working with crystals, I feel. They're very, very powerful. The beauty of making the essences with these rounded crystals, rounded gemstones, is that they work more what's the word? Thermostatically is what I wanted to say. Like they work with your aura because they're rounded, and they're very gentle. A dear friend of mine who's a chiropractor was very familiar with Ayurveda and essences. He's passed on, but he had been using them far longer than me. And when he used these particular gemstone essences, he was very impressed because he said sometimes they can be a little jaggedy and rough, and as some of the crystals are. they're these. The reason that they come from India is because people from all over the world send their gemstones to India to be made into beads or to be
Hmm.
cut. It's not that they originally came from India, but that's where they take them to be worked on, to cut.
And Star, you mentioned several times about the quality of the stones that you use in your essences. Now, is that because you're concerned about the purity of the stone involved, or what's the reason that you like that really top quality stone for the essences?
It's again because these particular essences work with the aura, and it's a rounded, it's gentle. You could probably get some that would be, if the pointed ones are probably more powerful in some ways, but this is a more gentle. You you take them for longer, uh, and the reason that I like it is about purity, and because there's not anything else with them. I make when you get an uncut crystal, often it's got other things. It's got the matrix of other things that come with it, and that can be just fine. It makes a particular frequency, but these are real specific. They're just what only that. And Virendra, he's a German perfectionist, I will say, and he grades them. That's his gift, is finding the highest quality and grading them, and he keeps the finest ones for himself, and those are the ones that we use to make the essences with.
That's wonderful. And Star, what would you say that your years of experience making gem essences has taught you about crystal energy?
Well, I would say that I've really learned that they can be very specific, and that's why I have so many. There's some have broader spectrums, and some are just really honed in. And and also one of the other things I've learned is they really empower the flowers. I feel like the gems are very much more physically oriented. They really address a lot of physical issues specifically. And the flowers seem to be more emotionally oriented. And yet we know that you can't separate the mind, the body, the spirit. They all work with each other. So it just seems like that to me, that's the direction they go. So mixing them really amplifies their benefits.
Well, it's so interesting that you say that the stones have more of a physical frequency and the flowers have more of an emotional frequency because our physical bodies remain relatively unchanged over time, right? Over the span of a human life cycle, but our emotions are almost constantly in flux. And so you have the flower, which is very short-lived, right?
Right.
And then the stone, which is much longer term. So it's just a really interesting metaphor for something you've noticed energetically.
Very good. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but I absolutely agree. And yeah, with flowers, it's that moment of bloom, and then it's done.
Yeah.
So it's so true.
What is the thing that you most enjoy about working with the crystal energy? What is it about the crystals themselves that kind of brings you joy about your work with them?
I would have to say color. I really love color, and I feel that it's a color therapy. I've always been drawn to color therapy, and this just personifies that color spectrum. I feel color is very healing, and that's probably I love to have color around me. You can see got a little purple back here. That's that's color brings me a great deal of joy, and so I think that's one of the things. And certainly, vibrational medicine is my life's work. So.
And would you say that in your experience, you found that the energy of the crystals is really very strongly tied to or even dependent upon the color that they exhibit? Do you think that that really influences the energetic quality that they put out?
I do. I think so. Um, I think that even you can, sometimes people will be drawn to colors that they need, just by virtue of looking at them. I have an iPhone app. It's only good for iPhones, unfortunately, right now. But it's got the photographs of the gems, and I feel and have had experience with simply looking at the photographs of them that there's a transmission that comes through.
I've had a lot of people share that as well. I think that's a common human experience now, especially in the digital age where so many of us are connecting through electronic devices. And even just, I mean, if you had a printed photograph or you're looking at a photograph on your screen, regardless, you're picking up on that frequency. It does cause a shift in your frequency, just seeing that.
And I felt that it's just the photographs themselves are of these gems that wanted to their pictures taken. They wanted that to be a part. And I have a strange little story of one time I was in a circle of women, and one of the women suddenly started getting some really strong abdominal pain. And so there was a circle of healers. She gets on the floor, and people are working on her, and I'm hearing, "Get your phone." Like, oh no, no, no. And I'm really hearing, "Get your phone, open the app." And in the app, you can type in body parts. And it just came in my head, type in pancreas. And I typed in pancreas, and several gemstones that were good for the pancreas popped up. And one, I can't remember which one it was. I'm thinking citrine, but I'm not real. I don't. No, it was something else. Anyway, it's that's the one that just stood out. So I clicked on it, and I actually took the phone with the photograph and put it on her, and her pain went away.
That's
It,
amazing.
it almost seems incredulous to me, but it's a true story.
It's one of those things that we sometimes have no explanation for how these things work when you can't quite connect all the pieces back to the source of how it created change, but all we have is the experience at
And
the end of the day.
that's it. So I really think I like having it in my phone because we got so much other energy going on in those little devices that I feel like I've got the guardians of all those gemstones in there. So
Well,
I
that's a
like
nice
that.
way to think about it. Star, what would you say is the biggest challenge that you've faced in your professional life, working with these kind of alternative energies instead of having a more mainstream career? That's a
Um,
loaded question, I know.
yeah, I mean it's like that your old friends and family think you're crazy. That part, you mean? That
A little bit
uh,
of that part.
or that I became invisible for a long time. After working in nuclear medicine, and then switching to this completely alternative place. I worked, before at the Cancer Foundation in Santa Barbara, a very uh, structured hospital place. And then to go to the other end of the spectrum, I would see my colleagues, my previous colleagues, and I would be invisible to them, especially if I would talk about it. So for a long time, there were just I couldn't even talk about it to people and until I had a new group of friends so that um, relying on results because there's not machines that prove it, although that's happening more and more now. There's some new videos out. Well, of course, Dr. Emoto did a lot of work showing the effect because I knew from the beginning that water holds energy, and that was just a very strong message for me because it's a uh, odd thing that you can put flowers or gemstones in some water in the sun and have that energy transferred to the water. But it's very clear that it works. And so that's been the most difficult thing, I guess, to not only um, work with my own skepticism, but everybody else's around me.
And so, how did you work through that? I mean, you mentioned just kind of realigning things in your life, getting a new group of friends, people who are more supportive of what you wanted to do. Is there any advice that you'd have for people who are watching today who maybe are ready to transition into an alternative career using crystals, and maybe they're having some of those same experiences, or doubt or worry or concern? I think it's totally normal for all of us to go through that as we're making a change in any area of our life. But what would you say to someone who wants to pursue a career in energy healing, and how?
It's that bliss thing. If it really brings you joy, then you have to do it, because otherwise life is too short and you don't want to miss it. And it's a gift that you that it's your job to give it away. And I feel that that's when when it just sounds like that's the most fun thing in the world for you, then you got to do it, and people will show up. It's you asked me earlier about some, really synchronicities, I would say, is what has guided me all along. Doors open up, and I feel when you commit to working with crystals or whatever it is that's bringing you that joy, that the opportunities will show up. You and to follow them when the door is there, open it. It's We need it more and more. I'm so convinced that vibrational healing and vibrational medicine is where we need to go. It works. It's the best thing is there's no side effects. The worst thing that happens is nothing. The most that happens is miracles. You can't say that about drugs. Uh,
I couldn't agree more. And I think my own personal journey really reflects that a lot as well. When it came time for me to make that decision, when I hit that fork in the road of, am I really going to make the leap and do this? It was that I couldn't imagine my life if I didn't do it. And I
that's
knew that I had to. I think there's just a kind of a calling that happens in healers. And I mean, you look at your history too. You were in the medical field. You were doing healing already. You were obviously called to that work of being of service to others. And then you just found a different way to do it that resonated more with your soul, with your inner being.
Oh, that's absolutely true. And when I left nuclear medicine, and I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to search for something else. Everybody said, "Oh, how can you leave such a good job for a woman?" This was a long time ago, but that really made me want to leave even more. But it was actually when one of the doctors, they had an acupuncture lecture at the hospital, and I was there late, and I ran into one of the doctors that I was working with, and he said, "What are you doing here so late?" I said, "Oh, I'm going to that acupuncture lecture." And he said, "Oh, don't waste your time." That was
Wow.
great, because when he said that, I knew. I thought, it's time for me to leave. And so I just had to take that leap of faith and go on my own search for the meaning of my life. And like you said, there is a decision to be made, and
But again, like you said, following those synchronicities and being open to the doors that the universe is showing you, and just agreeing to walk through. I mean, the universe
yes,
opens the door, but you have to walk through.
right.
So, Star, thank you so much. Can you tell all of us a little bit more about your business and any projects you have going on, and where people can find you online?
Yes, I'd love to. Uh, um, my website is staressence.com, StarEssence, one R in star. Uh, and um, I have a book. I have a book here
A wonderful
called
book.
Bliss and Blessings, and it talks about how making the essences, and including the flowers and the gems, and my app. And I'm actually putting together a trip to Arkansas to go swim in the lake with the crystals.
Wonderful.
Have you been to Arkansas
I
to
have. I was lucky enough when I was younger. My grandparents actually lived there, so I would go down on spring breaks and things like that, and just comb the front yard for crystals. They lived right in Mount Ida, so I'd just go outside and pick up quartz crystals, and my grandma would mail me a little box. Every once in a while, I'd get a little box of crystals in the mail because she was out raking the yard.
I'm just getting skin knowledge all over when you're saying that. You're really doing your right work.
Yeah,
How
I think
lucky
so.
for you.
Well, so staressences.com, and also
Star
check out
essence,
the
not
book.
plural.
Dot
Star,
what?
not. There's no S on the end. Not star
Okay,
essences.
thank you. So
I couldn't. Yeah.
staressence.com, and it's actually a really cool site. I encourage you to go check it out. And also, Star's book is amazing, which is what actually made me reach out and contact her today. I've had that book for a few years and I love it. So thank you, all of you, for watching. And Star, thank you for taking time to share your wisdom, your kind energy, your sharing spirit with all of us today. I'm sure everyone learned a great deal, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Ashley. It was really my pleasure.
And thank you all for watching, and crystal blessings.